But in the past week, we can measure ourselves by actions. What have we done on this side of the House? We've introduced new powers to curb disruptive protests. We're protecting public services against undisruptive strike action, Mr. Speaker, and we have new laws to stop the boats.
Well, let's break that one down.
We've introduced new powers to curb disruptive protests.
That would be the Public Order Bill, which the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has said is incompatible with the UK's international human rights obligations regarding people's rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association.
We're protecting public services against undisruptive strike action, Mr. Speaker.
That would be the government's Antistrike Bill, designed to rob millions of workers of their democratic right to strike, to force them to work against their will and allow them to be sacked if they refuse. These are our nurses, our teachers, our railway workers. It's unthinkable and almost certainly illegal. And see a pattern here. It's an onslaught by this government on British liberties. And it's no coincidence it comes at the very moment workers across the country are standing together and saying enough is enough. And let's not forget the Bill of Rights Bill, which will reduce human rights protections and government accountability. All measures designed to prevent criticism of this government.
And we have new laws to stop the boats.
Well, by now even Larry the Cat knows the government's illegal migration bill is a flagrant breach of the government's obligations under both the Refugee Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights. It says as much on the front page of the bill.
The bill, very unusually, on the cover, says the Home Secretary is unable to make a statement that the provisions of the illegal migration bill are compatible with the Convention rights.
This is all absolutely shocking, and the Prime Minister's actually boasting about it. How are we allowing the country to sleepwalk into this?
Since 2010, there are 1.7 million fewer people living in poverty as a result of the actions of this government, and that includes hundreds of thousands fewer children living in poverty.
Every single week, the Prime Minister slaps himself on the back with this one.
We don't want any child to grow up in poverty, and that's why I'm proud that there are 1.7 million fewer people living in poverty today than in 2010 because of the actions of this and previous Conservative governments. That includes hundreds of thousands of children.
And on it goes.
The number of people in poverty lower.
He's even got the Deputy Prime Minister doubling down.
And we have taken 1 million working age people out of poverty altogether. That is the record of my party, and one of which I am very proud.
Well, the reality this government doesn't want to publicise is that child poverty has just hit a record high. The number of children in food poverty has doubled in the last year. More than 4 million kids are now living in poverty. More than 4 million. It's a staggering 30% of all children in the UK. 1 million adults can't even afford to eat every day. 9 million are skipping meals and cutting back on food. A record 2.1 million people are now using food banks. Over 14 million now living in poverty. More than 3 million adults in hygiene poverty. And this is the government's response.
Mr. Speaker, I will proudly defend our record in office.
And every week we also get this gem.
I do want to ensure that children don't grow up in poverty, but we know that the best way to do that is to ensure that they don't grow up in a workless household.
Well, not under this government it doesn't. Average wages are falling at their fastest rate for more than 2 decades, and 7 in 10 children living in poverty are actually from working families.
He also talked about our record on the economy. And I am very surprised, Mr. Speaker, because I've stood here week after week when he's been so keen to quote the IMF, Mr. Speaker. And he seemed to have missed their press conference yesterday, where they actually raised our growth forecast by one of the highest they've ever done, said that we've acted decisively to make sure that the economy is growing, and credited this government with having a very positive effect on future growth.
Well, sorry to rain on your parade. Britain's economy is still almost at the bottom of the G7 growth table, and food inflation remains at a staggering 19%, a 45-year high.